Have you ever noticed it? How our modern, supposedly secular politics can feel, well, almost religious? There's this absolute certainty, right? This dividing the world into good and evil, this feeling that we're standing on the edge of something huge and final. It's like an apocalyptic fervor, where your political opponents aren't just wrong, they're practically heretics. So let's try to figure out where all this intense energy is coming from.
And you know, it really doesn't get much weirder than this. Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire, a major political player, has apparently been giving these off-the-record lectures in San Francisco. And what's the topic? The Antichrist. Yeah, he's worried that things like international agencies, even environmentalism, could be setting the stage for some kind of global titan who comes in promising peace and safety right before the end. A Silicon Valley titan philosophizing about Armageddon? What is going on?
And this kind of apocalyptic tone isn't just in Silicon Valley, not by a long shot. Just look at how the culture war is often described. It's not a simple debate over policy. You hear it framed as a life and death struggle. The language itself is existential. It suggests that if the other side wins, it's not just a political loss, it's the end of everything, the total collapse of civilization as we know it.
And this has incredibly real-world consequences. There's a powerful political force, you might have heard of it, called Christian Zionism. They actively support the state of Israel, not just for geopolitical reasons, but because they believe it fulfills specific biblical prophecies, prophecies that have to happen before the second coming of Christ. We're talking about a foreign policy agenda that's literally being driven by an end-times checklist.
So all of this brings us to our big question for today. Why does so much of our modern political conversation, from tech moguls to culture warriors to foreign policy, why does it all feel like it's about the end of the world? What's the hidden logic that ties all these seemingly random things together? Well, the answer, as it turns out, isn't new at all. It's a very old and, frankly, very dangerous idea. And it was diagnosed by a philosopher who lived through some of the worst political disasters of the 20th century. His name was Erich Vogelin. He had to flee the Nazis in Austria, and he spent the rest of his life trying to understand the massive movements of his time, Nazism, Stalinism. He called them political religions. He saw that they weren't just ideologies, they were these twisted, secular attempts to find ultimate meaning and, salvation through politics.
And he gave this dangerous impulse a name that sounds really complex, but I promise it's actually pretty simple and incredibly powerful. He called it immanentizing the eschaton. Okay, let's break that down. The eschaton is just a fancy word for the end of time, the final state of perfection. You can basically think of it as heaven. Immanent just means here on earth, in our real, tangible world. So to immanentize the eschaton is to try and force heaven down onto earth, to build a perfect utopia, right here, right now, using the raw power of politics.
This slide really shows the fundamental split in thinking. See, traditional religions usually see perfection as transcendent. It's something beyond this world, something you hope for in the next life. But this impulse that Vogelin identified, it completely flips that on its head. It says, no, we don't have to wait. We can achieve perfection now. And that shift changes everything. It moves the focus from spiritual hope to radical political action.
Vogelin traced this idea all the way back to an ancient religious movement called Gnosticism. The core belief of the Gnostics was pretty simple. The world is fundamentally broken and corrupt. But, and this is the key part, a special, enlightened group of people possess a secret knowledge, something called gnosis. And they believe this special knowledge gives them the right and even the duty to just tear down this corrupt old world and build a new perfect one. And yeah, that often requires a revolution, an apocalypse.
Now, once you have this framework in your mind, you start seeing this Gnostic pattern everywhere. All throughout history. This isn't just a 20th century problem. It's this recurring, dangerous dream that has haunted Western civilization for literally millennia.
I mean, this timeline lays out the pattern pretty clearly. You had the ancient Jewish zealots who believed their political revolt against Rome would literally bring about God's kingdom on earth. Fast forward a few centuries to the 1200s, and you have this monk, Joachim of Fiore, who prophesied a coming age of the spirit that would create a new man and a perfect society. His ideas inspired all sorts of revolutionary movements. And then, bam, the 20th century. This impulse just explodes into the totalitarian projects of Nazism and communism, which both promised heaven on earth, a 1,000-year Reich or a workers' paradise, but only after eliminating everyone who stood in their way. So here's the crucial point. This impulse is still with us. It's just wearing modern clothes. So let's use Vogelin's key to unlock those puzzles we started with at the beginning.
First up, the culture war.
From Vogelin's perspective, this isn't just a political disagreement. It's a clash between two competing, secularized theologies. Both sides are fighting tooth and nail for their vision of a just and moral order, their own version of salvation history. They've just stripped away all the explicitly religious language.
This table here really illustrates how that translation happens. Look at how these core theological concepts that used to point to a transcendent God get dragged down to earth and turned into political weapons. So for example, the sovereignty of God gets replaced by the political goal of radical human autonomy. The biblical concept of being made in the imago Dei, the image of God, becomes a secular principle of universal human dignity. And a belief in salvation history turns into this faith in the inevitable arc of historical progress. Each side is fighting for its own immanentized moral universe.
Now, while the culture war is a secularized form of this impulse, Christian Zionism is a much more direct and explicit example. It is, quite literally, an attempt to influence geopolitics to bring about a prophesied end to history. There's no hiding the ball here.
The logic is laid out just like a prophetic blueprint. Adherents see the founding of Israel in 1948 and its capture of Jerusalem in 1967 as huge prophecies fulfilled. Check, check. The next major step on the list, they believe, is the rebuilding of the Jewish temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which, of course, is the current site of the Dome of the Rock, one of Islam's holiest sites. The geopolitical implications of that are, well, they're enormous. For believers, political support for Israel isn't just policy, it's actively setting the stage for the end of the world.
And that brings us right back to Peter Thiel. His fear of some forced, one-world government promising peace and safety is a perfect modern-day Gnostic drama. He's deeply suspicious of any political project that promises to solve all our problems and end all conflict. Because in this framework, the attempt to create a perfect, synthetic peace on earth isn't salvation. It's the ultimate tyranny. It's the work of the Antichrist.
So, if the attempt to create a perfect world is so incredibly dangerous, are we just stuck? Is there a way to do our politics without constantly falling into these apocalyptic battles?
Well, the political philosopher Danielle Allen offers a really powerful alternative. She argues that the Gnostic demand for perfection is exactly the problem. The goal of politics shouldn't be to create some flawless utopia, because that's an impossible and dangerous fantasy.
Her metaphor for this is just beautiful and profound. She says a perfectly spherical, flawless pearl is synthetic, it's fake. A real pearl has blemishes. It has little hills and valleys. It's imperfect, and that is what makes it authentic and valuable. Our democracy, she argues, should be like that imperfect pearl.
The practical takeaway from this, then, is a huge shift in our goal. The aim is not to build a perfect world, but to build the best imperfect world we possibly can. And that means embracing the messiness, the compromise, and the hard, never-ending work of democratic life. It means talking to strangers, building trust even when we disagree, and accepting that this shared world of ours will always be flawed, but it can still be valuable, it can still be real.
And that leaves us with a final question. In an age of such intense polarization, where the promise of a perfect, final victory is so incredibly tempting, can we learn to value the imperfect pearl? Can we build a better world without demanding a perfect one? Not really, is the challenge that lies right in front of all of us.